Morning, everyone. NWA Prepper here. I want to come to you today to talk to you a little bit about bleeding. I guess actually more about bleeding control, but bleeding nonetheless. I talked yesterday or the day before, I forget, about knowing your first aid kit. I talked about tourniquets and some things like that, but so today's just about bleeding. And depending on your school of thought or who taught you or where you were educated or where you went to class or any of that is, what your school of thought on bleeding control is. There are 4 ways to control bleeding: direct pressure, pressure point, elevation, and tourniquet. And in the old days, they taught you that was, or they taught me, I don't know. They taught that was the tier that it went into. You applied direct pressure. If that didn't work, you went to elevation, or to elevate the extremity or whatever's bleeding above the heart. Then you did pressure points. And then if that didn't control the bleeding, then you went to tourniquet. Well, that's not how we do it anymore. It's still the 4 ways to control bleeding, so that's what we're going to talk about first. Number 1 way to control any bleeding is direct pressure. Short of crazy things, direct pressure controls bleeding. It just does. That is also your body's initial response to bleeding is to grab it or touch it. You cut your hand, what's the first thing you do? You grab your hand and you start squeeze. And that's good. Direct pressure means applying pressure on the wound. And I'm not trying to be condescending. It's not to the general area. It's where the blood's coming out is where you apply direct pressure. You don't have to squeeze so hard that you break them in half, but you do need to squeeze hard enough that you apply pressure to the tissues and to the veins in there and the capillaries. Or you're not going to stop arterial bleeding with that, but the veins and the capillaries, so that it makes the opening smaller so your platelets can clot that smaller opening easier. And then you hold it long enough that it allows them to clot behind that and make a full clot, so that when you release the pressure, it either clots easier or it's already stopped. Pretty simple. Direct pressure directly on the wound. Firm pressure for a while, and I'm talking more than 20 seconds. You gotta apply pressure and give your body time to clot, or their body time to clot, which is where a pressure dressing comes in pretty handy. Israeli combat dressings, ETDs or EDTs, ETDs, emergency trauma dressings, or you can make a pressure bandage with what you have. I keep a ton of Kerlix around, or a 4x4 bulky dressing, just for that. I don't even unroll it. I put some kind of a dressing on the wound, like a 4x4 or a Teflon pad, non-stick. Slap it on there, and that's if I have time. If I don't, I just use the Kerlix or the bulky dressing. I slap it on there, and then I tie it down, and there's some techniques to apply pressure where you want on the arm and how you bandage. It just takes practice and a little bit of training. So, pressure dressings are great. So I really like them. I'm not going to reach for it because I'm driving, but right here in my door, I've got a North American Rescue 4-inch trauma dressing, or similar to an Israeli dressing, right there in my door. They're great. They're not expensive. I think it's $6, $7, whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's ready-made, it's ready to grab and ready to go. So, direct pressure, then we have pressure points and elevation. The elevating above the heart works great if it's an arm or leg or hand or foot. You know, the theory is to get gravity to help you slow down the bleeding, and that may work great. I usually, if it's an arm or leg, automatically when I grab it to apply pressure, unless there's some kind of trauma that doesn't allow me to, or a back injury or something, then I elevate it as I'm applying direct pressure. So that's kind of a twofer for me. When I can. Sometimes you can't do elevation. I'm not saying put them, lay them down with their head down just so you can stop their foot from bleeding. If it's in their chest or thorax or their abdomen, you're not going to be able to do that. It's in their butt or their femur. It's hard to do that. But so elevation works when there's no call against it. Pressure points take a little bit of practice. The pressure points that I'm talking about are femoral, which is deep in the groin. It takes a lot of pressure to get there. Sometimes skinny folks just don't have the oomph to get it. It's deep in the groin. Then you've got your brachial, which is up here on your arm. It's between your muscle, make your muscle, and it's in the middle of your bicep and your tricep in there. There's a few others on the face, but those are the main ones when we're talking about pressure points. Is you press those and you occlude them to the best of your ability. You are not capable of occluding them with your hand completely, and if you do for a moment or two, it's not enough to ever be a tourniquet. So you're just squishing it and slowing the blood flow, or slowing the pressure, which lets your clotting factors clot faster. And then tourniquet. Tourniquets are really a video all in themselves. There's a ton of them out there. Tourniquets are great for extremities. If direct pressure doesn't work right away, I'm going to go ahead and go to a tourniquet. If they're bleeding very bad at all and I can't control it in a moment or two or a minute or two, I'm going to put on a tourniquet. If they have multiple injuries that are significant bleeding or an airway issue or other problems that I need to get to that make that air go in and out and blood go round and round, I'm going to apply a tourniquet. Depending on the bleed and the amount of damage, I may need a second tourniquet. That's new training. Don't get all crazy with me. That's the next generation. Because I am right where I'm at now. I'm within an hour of definitive care or the hospital. So if I put on a tourniquet quickly, I know anywhere I can have them out in just a little while and have them in an ambulance and have them on the way to the hospital. If it's so bad that I can't control it with direct pressure and I'm further than an hour from the hospital, there's different things you can do that are wilderness medicine and long-term emergency care. But tourniquets are still a big part of it. So, to recap, we've got direct pressure, pressure points, elevation, and tourniquet. The 4 ways to control bleeding in the field. None of them are difficult. You can do them. You just can. Yes, they can all be improvised, but for $10, I can for $5 if you wanted, For $5, I can have a trauma dressing, and I can get a tourniquet there. And I want to say tourniquets are about $25, $35, kind of in a range. You can find them cheaper. But there are some clones out there, some that aren't the same. So anyway, thanks for watching. It's another crappy, rainy, cold day. It's in the mid-30s. I just wanted to come at you and kind of throw those ways to control bleeding at you. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Let's get ready.